Quantitative easing means printing money and handing it out at 0% interest. In the end, this will lead to massive inflation, as you know. The same 8 men who invented the modern German central bank in 1912 or so also invented the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. The same men, exactly. In 1928, Germany was stuck with hyperinflation due to quantitative easing, and what cost 1 mark ended up costing 400,000 marks. That's called hyperinflation. In 1932, what cost 1 yuan or RMB in China ended up costing 300,000. Both of these happened in short order, and that is how it could happen in the United States. If the dollar becomes valueless, as you know, 67% of the world's reserve currency is held in national banks and is held in US dollars, then no one will be able to turn a profit selling things in the United States. And 50% of the world's buying is done in the United States. But I will bet that is down to 40% already. So the International Monetary Fund, which is a private bank with no public mandate and which has screwed up foreign economies around the globe, notably Africa and Asia, and tried to mess with Korea in 1997 and 98, remember, already has a new currency called the Bancor in place and ready to go. Look it up if you can. The Bancor, B-A-N-C-O-R, will be a replacement currency for central banks only, and their banking friends at the top of the heap in terms of size, like HSBC, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Bank Corporation, and other whoppers like JP Morgan. Anyway, the Bancor will be traded for dollars at a good rate to these banks, but what about people? Those holding any investment, from houses to stocks to land to money in any currency, will be ruined unless they exchange dollars for Bancor the very first minute it is available to do so, as this exchange rate will go bananas very quickly, probably in hours. So as you know, oil, gold, and silver are flying because no one wants to be in any currency, especially the dollar. So soon oil will trade in euros and has already. The first time was in 2006, and the U.S. reaction was to immediately claim Iran had nuclear weapons, as they had sold 300,000 barrels of oil to China for euros, since they knew the dollar was potentially going to go bad in terms of value. Since I wrote this, of course, the euro itself is suffering because the southern countries are in major banking decline, and the northern countries, notably Germany, have bailed out the banks. They haven't bailed out the workers, mind you. In fact, Germany has put on austerity measures that will make it very hard for workers to find a job, even harder for governments to spend the type of money needed to make jobs, and in the end, these austerity measures could cause a rift between what we will call Southern Europe and Northern Europe quite soon. And one wonders about the future of the euro, and so perhaps the dollar and the euro, both very developed in terms of the countries they represent, are in trouble because too much of the buying power in those countries has been shipped to cheaper labor. When the U.S. government gave tax breaks for companies to ship labor, which was long after NAFTA passed, and well into what we call GATT II, and the G7 expanding to 8 and then 20, at that point, the almighty profit of large corporations took precedence over local jobs, and those local jobs dried up, and people found other work, but they didn't find enough other work to keep buying clothes at, let's say, Macy's, or Chico's, or Foot Locker, or any number of other places that, even in clothing, have closed up shop, or are at least in bankruptcy. So, with no buying power to the regular man, because the regular man is now working 2 jobs for a total of $12 an hour, when he had 1 job for $20 an hour, this basic scenario makes it so that the last step left, this quantitative easing, is the only thing that's keeping the U.S. stock market from an immediate collapse, and I'll get into that a little bit more. First, the U.S. has 9,000 house foreclosures per day now, and jobs are drying up, as I said. And the government of individual states are firing up to 50% and no less than 10% of their workers, teachers included. Wisconsin, 50%, Tennessee, 50%, North Carolina, 25%, etc. of potential workers. And in the public schools, we're looking at 15%, and up to even 20-25% of the teachers are fired, meaning middle schools will have classes of 70 students. Anyone remember middle school? Like me, anyone ever taught middle school? 70 students in a middle school class just doesn't work. Even if they were all girls, it wouldn't work. So we lost our high-paying manufacturing jobs. Remember, in the U.S., only 25% of the people have a bachelor's degree, compared to Korea with 80%. Therefore, the requirement for blue-collar jobs is much higher in the U.S. than some other developed or developing countries. The $20 per hour jobs moved to China, Mexico, Argentina, etc., Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. Not too many into Malaysia, India, and certainly now Bangladesh. So the Chinese people will work harder to make 52 cents an hour than Americans did to work to make $20 an hour. You can't resist moving there if you want to stay competitive. Steve Jobs never brought the manufacturing sector of his company into the United States because, as he said, to stay competitive it must be in China. And at his plant in China, workers famously jump out high windows to commit suicide because of the insane working hours and low pay. The workers are having a tough run right now, and if you strike, they're likely to move your plant to cheaper labor. So this brings us back to Korea, where I'm sitting. Who will buy Korean goods in the United States? This will end up being a problem. Not right now. Their cars are selling well. The little Samsung phones and iPads do very well. But if the U.S. can no longer afford the amount of clothing it used to buy, a lot of other doodads will probably go by the wayside soon. Korea is 70% dependent on exports for its economy, and 67% dependent on imports for its food. If their export game dries up, I'm talking about South Korea, could have a hard time affording its food. Sounds radical? It's not, though. It's just mathematics, accounting. South Korea eats 3 times more than it grows, but with the money, with what money will it pay for food if the U.S. goes into major depression? Is the U.S. already in a depression? Starting in 2002, we were at 2,000 home foreclosures per day. That number has run as high as 11,000 in 2010. But we're losing 8,000-9,000 homes a day to foreclosure, and yet some people in the investment world say a housing boom is on the rise, house prices are going up. I see. Well, the house prices didn't go up in Detroit for a long time, and I don't see them on the big rebound in places like Las Vegas either. We'll see if they come back in Florida, but that depends on pensions and retirement funds, and those are going the way of the dinosaur. Quantitative easing has pumped $8 billion per day into the stock market, and that's $8 billion per day at one time, and it goes directly into the U.S. stock market. It's barely still going up, the stock market, because all of Europe and Asia are set to sell, and are selling already, only balanced by this quantitative easing, all of which means that there will be way too many dollars in float for the value of any single dollar to hold up if people ever sell their stocks. Proof is in the commodities of all kinds. Any type of commodity, be it food, metals, doesn't matter, the prices are going up in terms of US dollars because people know the value of the dollar is going down because of how much we owe. It may be 16 trillion. I think we're marching towards 17 trillion as I speak. We could print the money and pay it back, but what kind of value would the dollar have then? So depression is deflation with lower prices. This is awful, but nothing compared to hyperinflation. It's bad already. Fuel is ×3 in the last 2 years. Food is ×4 in the U.S. And no one is able to find work. I mean, not no one, but the jobs are drying up. The unemployment numbers only count 1 for people still looking for work, and 2, people out of work for 18 months or less. Meaning the U.S. is well over 25% unemployed at this point. The criminally criminally left behind and or unable to find work for more than 2 years don't count as unemployed. And this the plan to allow workers to get more unemployment benefits than the normal 18 months is also drying up. I hope that one is saved. But after all, we have to afford tax cuts for the rich. So how are we going to save unemployment for the people whose jobs we shipped away? What happens to Korea if the U.S. goes into hyperinflation? 1/3 to 2/3 of South Korea will starve to death if the U.S. goes into hyperinflation. That's the fact, ugly as it is. The U.S. economy may suck, but we grow 4.5 times more than we eat. So, at the very base level of agriculture, we should be able to survive, except for one thing. The average piece of lettuce or hamburger eaten in the U.S. travels 2,500 kilometers to get to the table. 2,500, 2,500, 2,500. That means hyperinflation will cause food prices to move up faster than fuel prices. Note the above. But can hyperinflation be stopped? Sure, if the banks pay the money back, which some have. That's a big if, because no one ever saw anything about the deals made when the bailout started in 2008, before Obama took office. Remember AIG? They had insured European banks, and the U.S. government gave them $1.3 trillion over time, and it was used to bail out European banks. But the U.S. taxpayer will pay the bill for 200 plus years. Really? Yeah, really. I know this stuff, and invested in gold in 2005. Lucky, eh? Added silver in 2010. Not stocks, but bullion and coins. By this I mean own, if you're going to find a way to keep your kids' money safe, if you have any extra money, do not buy gold stocks. Gold stocks, for some reason, for the first time ever, have not led gold prices. Usually gold stocks go up at a rate higher than gold prices. And gold stocks, if anything, have been flat, while gold has been flying at times. This is a conspiracy, just like the conspiracy to keep owning stocks, keep buying stocks with the quantitative easing money, etc., etc. So how to avoid hyperinflation? We have the banks pay the money back on a time schedule. At 0%, they ought to be able to pay it back soon, except more homes keep going into foreclosure, which screws the banks and all other homeowners as housing prices crash, just like in Tokyo for the last 15 years. But it's worse in the U.S. because the People's Bank of China, under many names now, owns approximately 20% of the mortgages in the United States. Ouch. They keep buying them at 80 to 90% discounts. They buy up homes also at 89 to 90% discounts. And that's a 90% discount to the tax value on the home, and tax values are traditionally way lower than a house is worth, but not now. Come on, Doug, how do we avoid hyperinflation? By burning the money when it gets paid back. It is that simple. But we have to announce that we're going to burn it, and then we really have to burn it. At which point our creditors, China alone, lends us $680 million a day, because that's where they sell their goods. China must keep the U.S. economy going somehow by allowing us to borrow more money, and we pay them almost no interest. And why was China so dumb as to do this? That's where they sell their goods. All their factories will close. Already Disney factories, about half of them are closed. But eventually people, when the value of the dollar goes down, will be demanding higher interest rates. But there's no excuse whatsoever in the American economy to raise interest rates. Oh, why? Because so many people have so much work that they're spending too much money? No. It's because of the same idiots that are causing the inflation, the bankers. we could raise interest rates because inflation is so high. You know, one thing they keep out of inflation, let's count it two, is fuel and food. Fuel and food are two things that they keep out of the inflation numbers in the U.S. When fuel and food are two of the most used things in the U.S., people still eat. How many cities don't have public transportation? And yet they keep fuel and food out of the inflation number. Why? Because of a nice tidy 2.4%, it would end up being untidy 10, 12, 15, 18, 20%. And that would look bad. And then, with that much inflation, you naturally would have to raise interest rates. Well, you have a tinkering, tonkering housing market that's coming back slightly because of damn near 4% or less, 3.7% mortgage rates. If you raise interest rates, the stock market and the housing market go into El Crasherino again, Crash City, USA. Higher interest rates? Yes, the stock market would crash for sure. Watch carefully the NYSE, New York Stock Exchange, the next year or two into 2013 and 14, as Ben Bernanke, tired of hearing about all the inflation he's causing by giving the NYSE $8 billion a day, has said he's going to quit quantitative easing for a while. Uh-oh. Here comes a crash, just in time to mess with Obama's second term. It's economy versus dead bin Laden. I figure people's lack of work or more layoffs coming in the public sector will make Obama's second term worse than his first. Certainly the Republicans do not want to be stuck holding the bag for this depression. So one wonders if they'll also toss up the 2016 election. I mean, you nominate a Mormon, there's a good chance to lose. Before that, you bring in Palin as a vice presidential candidate, and you really don't want to win. I mean, this last time, Romney and the other Republicans went into Michigan and said bailing out General Motors was a mistake. In Michigan they said that? You can't tell me they're trying to win. And they know that Ohio and Michigan are the key battleground states, and they absolutely tanked them worse than Ivan Lendl tanks when he gets mad in the second set back in the 1970s. Tank old Rooney. Okay, so no one wants to be left holding the bag during a depression. During the last depression, Herbert Hoover was in office, and sure enough, the Democrats controlled the Congress for 50 or 60 years after that. So whoever gets left holding the bag this time, they figure is also going to be out of luck politically forever. But wait, that's called depression, implying deflation. Hyperinflation is so much worse than a depression. Hyperinflation caused, if I'm not mistaken, World War II. They put some terms on Germany after the Versailles Treaty after World War I, and bingo bango, Germany's economy stunk, so they started printing money, and wow, before you could say holy cow, we had World War II. Yes, the rise of Hitler was caused by, in China, communism was permanently a factor after its hyperinflation in 1932. Note, however, the Communist Party members and other rich folks in China right now have bitten hard on the capitalist apple and may take a giant fall if the U.S. falls. In fact, Chinese stocks and the Chinese economy may be falling in a way that will be more damaging than the U.S., and that may have started here in 2013. That's quite possible. We'll see. So if we avoid hyperinflation, as any economist would pray we do, then a whopper of deflation could replace what is now politely called stagflation. But wages in the U.S. are not stagnant. They're dropping like a rock. And the inflation is not under control because the official numbers include everything except food and fuel, as we said. And that's a joke because food and fuel are both going up, partly because of each food because of fuel. Fuel because of J.P. Morgan and others who just toy with the price. Ever since Adam Smith invented economics for profit, meaning turned economic and economists into an industry, the industry has become more and more a mouthpiece for the needs of big business, and less truthful as academics or even human beings. Oops, sorry. So as long as the stock market climbs or inches up or treads water, then everything's okay, right? No, not by a long shot. Corporate profits already played their last card by either moving factories to cheaper labor, see the U.S. doing that, or importing cheaper labor, South Korea does that. The U.S. has a lot of imported cheap labor when it comes to picking our crops in the form of Mexicans and others from Central and South America. What else is there? Nothing. The games are all over. There is no legitimate economic way that you can stop a massive run of hyperinflation or deflation. Please email me, dougstuber@gmail.com, if you've got one, because I swear there isn't one, and I'm pretty sure I can go after you if you think you got one. What else is there? Nothing. No longer will China buy up U.S. credit card debt like it used to. Doing so is economic suicide, as consumers are going bankrupt, rat-a-tat-tat. And losing your house means no one will hire you. And then what? You live with the wife and your children in your car? So deflation is a long shot at this point. Oil prices will continue to skyrocket as long as prices over $100 a barrel stay in effect for a long time. The sand oil of Canada comes into play. So, as it takes at least $90 to $95 a barrel to refine it into gasoline, and maybe $80 per barrel to turn into heating oil. So if the price stays over $100 a barrel, which means just about $4 for a gallon of gas, then they can turn all that really polluting sand oil into gasoline, and just the process of doing so is a major pollutant, as many people will tell you by now. So oil prices will stay high, and anything that moves will cost more. But on what paycheck will anyone be able to buy anything but food? There is a crunch coming, and it's going to be massive. Anyone who is an economist and denies this now is surely a propagandist, or a new breed I like to call the idiot class economist. I doubt the Federal Reserve will burn the returning money. No, they'd rather lend it out again at 0%. And for every dollar loaned, 9 or even up to 30 more dollars are created. See zeitgeistthemovie.com, zeitgeistmovie.com, for a real eye-opener. It has 3 movies out there. Also, see Capitalism, a Love Story if you haven't. See it again. See it again if you have, which is a very short on good information, but provides some, though Michael Moore is, I don't know what now. I mean, I wish Michael Moore was still covering the U.S., but rumor has he's in the Middle East. But Michael Moore says and finds out things that regular journalists for regular TV and newspaper aren't allowed to. Investigative journalism has taken a shot, a big shot. The great thing about Michael Moore is that he's also sarcastic and silly, and this may take a little bit away from his information, but it also makes it entertaining enough so that people will go see the movies. Good for him. For rock-solid stuff about all this, go to The Economist out of London. Subscribe to it. It's cheap even in Korea, though in English, so it won't be easy for Koreans. We can go over any article that you want in there. Again, just give me a call on Skype. The inflation scenario is somewhat mitigated by the fact that quantitative easing is flowing directly into M2, meaning the stock market, and not M1, meaning the number of dollars employed. As long as the money stays in stocks, and the purpose of these billions of dollars is in fact to keep the stock market up, even when foreigners are pulling out in droves, then the M1 supply won't go up unless the filthy rich sell, thus ruining their own investments. And even then, the money is likely to move into some other M2 type area, or stayed locked up in silver or gold or arable land, thus never completely ruining the value of the dollar. Well, this is my great hope. But if that happens, then deflation could happen, because there aren't enough jobs to pay a living wage, and when people are working 2 jobs, they not only don't have enough money to buy anything, they don't have enough time to go buy anything. The insulting and dangerous thing about this and other bailout schemes is that while all this is going on to keep the richest of the rich rich, many supports for the poorest among us are being slashed, and perhaps without ever a chance to return. While Germany is to be lauded for its drive for alternative energy and fairness to those who can't find work, the U.S. is becoming a lawless state, as breaking the law is one of the few means left for so many people to keep their families fed. If Head Start, food stamps, and other supports are cut or slashed entirely, considering how many labor jobs have moved to other countries, what does the U.S. government plan to do with the crime that is escalating to the point of between 90 and 120 gun deaths per day in the United States, and a prison population that equals 1/4 of all the prisoners on Earth, while the U.S. has 6% of the population? The number got to 2 million under Bill Clinton, so I'm wondering how many more for-profit jails have been built and what the exact number is right now. But we know that prisoners are in fact working in jail. That's not just a Chinese thing. And we know that the corporations are paying $7 an hour for those workers. And we know, if we read any type of news about this, that the inmates are being paid between 21 cents and $2 an hour. What about the money in between? The $5, $6 in between? Well, these for-profit jails can use them to make profit. Why? Because the money that it takes to feed the prisoners comes from taxes. The money it takes to house the prisoners and buy guards for the prisoners and build the jails comes from taxes. And therefore, if they can squeeze how much they feed the prisoners, if they can keep more prisoners in solitary confinement, and if they can get the ones that aren't in solitary confinement to work at 21 cents an hour, the rest of the money that the corporations have to, by law, pay for that work goes into the profits ledger, and the people who own the for-profit prison companies, their stock value goes up. And the executives can pay themselves whatever they damn please. Oh, I know. It's those FEMA camps complete with gas chambers. That's what's next. Some people deny that FEMA has built up to 90, 100, 120 of these camps. Some people deny that they have already hired guards at these camps. Some people deny that these camps often run right by railroad tracks. And some people, even with video, deny that there are large gas chambers built in all of these places. And then how can you deny the fact that they have large plastic coffins that can hold up to 10 bodies each, already dug into the ground, waiting for bodies to be put in? My question is, whose bodies? Is the U.S. government planning to be attacked? Is there some foreign body coming here to attack us, and then there's going to be a big fat war, and we need concentration camps, formerly known as prisoner of war camps? And then what about the gas chambers? You've got to be scared about this. If we have an economic demise, there will be some angry people. And what's going to happen to those angry people? Just look at the clip of Joe Lieberman, who says, you know, the American people should be scared about what the U.S. government could do to them. He said that in public? Not exactly in public, but some of the stuff Romney said while he was out on the campaign trail and being unknowingly videoed, it's mighty scary stuff. It's all out there on YouTube. Go look it up. What I call this is totalitarian capitalism, and I started calling it that in 1985. I mean, the jails in the U.S. are also employing tactic of prison labor. I went into all of that. Street protests are not going to get the job done against these type of fascists. It's just not going to work. A complete overhaul of the way people are elected is required, and although McCain kind of feigned interest in election reform, that ain't going to work either. So where are we? The federal government of the United States is almost wholly corrupt by now. You have a couple of the people that are not completely corrupt, you know, the Bernie Sanders of the world, or you know, Kucinich, maybe from Minnesota, Senator Al Franken. But basically the whole show is run Democrat and Republican by big money, corporate money, and where that is in play, and other people's big money where that is in play. Quantitative easing ends up a drop in the bucket compared to what could happen next with this, you know, corporate profit is king mentality screw the worker, screw the environment. Perhaps this is scary, since Obama demanded no Miranda rights be read to the Boston Marathon bomber, which is a very sad case. I mean, let's face it, the U.S. doesn't need any of this stuff, but who does? And having run the oil pipeline from the Caspian Sea through Afghanistan and now Pakistan, I do believe that's why Obama spread the war into Pakistan, where Bush never had. And Obama spread it there after Osama bin Laden was dead, for God's sake. Perhaps the U.S. will now start to take care of business at home. Having won what we wanted, apparently, in Greater Middle East, and calling it a stalemate against Iran, and God forbid, please don't start anything here in Northeast Asia, then what will we do with all those guys in the Army? Well, I'm a little bit scared. In Boston, they imposed martial law, which made people feel safe, but they imposed martial law. In effect, martial law. Everyone's to stay inside. And you get a picture of a soldier in a bulletproof vest delivering a couple gallons of milk. And you got soldiers and police outnumbering the thousands after one or two guys, and they got their men, which is great. I hope they get due process, but if they're not allowed to be read their Miranda rights, those prisoners may well, the one surviving brother may well, in fact, be tried in a military trial as a terrorist. If so, they can have that trial on a boat, a ship, a Navy ship, and he can easily not be afforded a defense attorney. It's a military hearing after all, and he can easily present no defense, this being a military hearing. He can be tried and found guilty and executed the same day, unlike a regular prisoner in the United States legal system. It's very scary. And Obama wasn't kidding. He is allowed and does have a list, and he can employ the use of this list at any time of Americans who are free to be assassinated. A 007, if you were, has now been enacted through Patriot Act II, and luckily it hasn't come to bear yet, but should it be necessary, Obama now has the authority. And God forbid, not allowing Miranda rights, Obama took that on his own. That there's no authority given for that. Obama's a constitutional scholar. If I remember, he was the editor of the Harvard Law Review, first African American to be such. He's a constitutional scholar, and he didn't rescind Patriot Act I and II right away? No. In fact, he's taking all that power. He's taking it all for himself, and the Republicans who backed him when he was in the primary stage against Hillary Clinton must be awfully proud of what they bought. That's all I can say. I mean, the guy is still continuing to consider lowering taxes for the rich, and he is without a doubt going to slash and burn a lot of programs that would help the poor, who have been made poorer by 20 years or more, 25 years worth of moving jobs to cheaper labor. So, the detainment centers, the FEMA detainment centers that have already hired guards, it's a little bit scary. And it has a lot more to do with what's going on than quantitative easing. Quantitative easing just means those who own stocks will be okay. But this can't work forever. Again, it's like a governmental, taxpayer-funded Ponzi scheme, and eventually the stock market will run out of gas. And the realities of the real estate market are that even at almost 0% going to the banks, and the banks offering 3.5%, 4% on mortgage rates, the market hasn't come storming back because there are not enough jobs to afford it. What's bringing the market back in some places is investors who are dumb enough to believe that things are going to go up, and who are dumb enough to believe, oh, let's buy cheap houses. Not just one, but lots of them, and rent them out. Well, when there's no jobs, they're going to be sorry they did that. And I hope the jobs keep going. But more and more regular, big old businesses, Eastman Kodak, and many others, are either gone entirely, like Kodak, or bankrupt, barely hanging on. And these are standards like Macy's. So it really makes you wonder, and I hope that everything works out, but I don't think it's going to work out, and people better get ready for it not working out. Americans are uncommonly far away from nature and knowing how to grow their own food, but that's what saved a lot of people during the last depression, was access to a farm that wasn't a dust bowl. That's all I got this time. There'll be more coming up. See you later.